Right, hello. Let's see. Where's our project? Here it is. Okay, what were we working on? We were working on oh yes. Yes, we didn't want to pass in the family. We rather want to actually download the family. So the question is, how do we want to deal with this? So when we load up the profile, we can even just pass the user UID here, like this, and then this profile is responsible for actually downloading the profile and the family. Now the question is, how should it do this? So we don't really want to render the app before we actually have a working profile. So this is one of the questions using, for example, Overmind, where you have a functional concept for the actions. Like the actions aren't attached to any object, they're just free floating functions. The question is then, where do I store references to, for example, if I listen to some event in an action, where do I store the disposer for that event? That's like a question there. In this object-oriented fashion we're doing now with classes, another question, like that question is easily answered. You just store it on the instance. But other questions starts to pop up, like, okay, we have this profile, and this profile is going to download the actual profile, and it's going to download the family. But how do we know that the profile is actually loaded? Because we really want to wait for that before we continue rendering. So that's really interesting. Yeah, actually I have no idea. Like, what's a good way to do that? Okay, so let's just come up with something. So for example, here the constructor could call a method, a private method, which grabs the profile and then sets the name, and then also grabs the family and sets the family. And then even the family, like here we should probably just pass in the family UID. And then the family itself, like the family instance, is responsible for actually loading data from the server. And then we also have to kind of wait for that. We want to wait for both of them before we actually deal with this. So I guess that's a problem with having logic close to the state, is that you don't have. So actually loading up the app is signing in, grabbing the user, grabbing the profile, grabbing the family, and then we're done. Then we're ready to actually render the app. But since we isolate the logic now, suddenly the signing in happens one place, grabbing the user happens somewhere else, grabbing the profile happens somewhere else, and grabbing the family even happens inside grabbing the profile. And we want to wait for everything here. And there's no concise place where we actually define this, what we're waiting for, which I find fascinating. So like in Overmind, you would just say like some action, sign, await, sign in, await. Yeah, so we will kind of get user here. Profile would then be await get profile, user UID. And then family would be await profile family UID, get profile get family, profile family UID. Or if you don't have that, you will kind of have null. So, and then go render the app, right? Like that's really nice for defining flow. But when we have isolated logic, we suddenly get this thing where we, okay, so we have like sign in, for example. Let's call this sign in as well. Or initialize, that's a good one. Initialize, and then we'll say like, again, user would be await. It's not, this is like pseudocode. And then we have profile, which is create profile, user UID. Now, how do we know when we're going to render? Like we could await profile. I don't know. Maybe this is why MobX has when. So what you do is you await when profile.state equals loaded, for example. So you basically just wait for that state to change. And then you continue rendering. This is possible to do. I don't quite remember the MobX when. I think it's called when. Reactions. Auto run. When. Yes, await when. So that's definitely one way to do it. And maybe that's the way it should be done. So we give the profile a state of it being loaded or not. And then we just wait for that. Yeah. I didn't see any other way of dealing with that. And maybe this should be, yeah, because I was reflecting a little bit on our disposer. I was thinking about calling it entity instead of disposer. Because disposer is very low level, it's very specific. But entity is more related to, okay, you're going to create multiple instances of this thing. It's most likely going to talk to a database, which means it's you probably need to dispose of it. Oh shit, I wonder why this happens. Ooh. I have to figure that out. It seems to be, yeah, when I go to the edge. And I wonder if it only happens inside here or yeah, it's kind of annoying. Anyways, yeah, so you talk to the database, you might listen to some events. So it needs to, you need to be, like, since you create instances of it, you need to be able to dispose those instances. So it makes perfect sense to have that disposable API inside it. But it could also have a state. So an entity has a state of being loaded or not, basically. So you would have, maybe we can just model this. So you would have an observable of state, which would be what should we call this? Like, I'm just rambling something here now. It can be loading, saving, loaded, and error, I guess. So the way this would work is that you always set it into a loading state, right? And then you decide when is it actually loaded. And then whenever you update the data, you put it into saving state. And if there's an error, you put it into an error state. And now you're able from the outside to await these transitions. Now, The problem though, runs until it returns true. Once it had a given effect function, returns a dispose. Yeah, but that's perfectly okay. Yeah, I'm a little bit unsure about this. Maybe it does make sense. Maybe it doesn't make sense. Again, like, I think we just have to try something. So let's see how this looks like when we actually implement it. So what we're going to do is say private async load profile. So the only thing we do here is that we say this UID is UID. And then we're going to say this load profile. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to say profile is await this API get. Oh, don't we have get profile? Okay, get profile. And then this UID. And then when that's done, we're going to say if profile.family UID. Let's implement this profile. Get profile UID string. Let's copy this one instead. Doc and then get. Does it actually? Let's see. It should return a promise of a profile. What the hell does it return? Oh. Can I say somehow what it's going to return? I guess yeah, I got a comment that Google is like dropping TypeScript support. As promise. Oh, wait, is it because? Yeah. Because I'm not actually getting the data here. Yeah, we have to do this. Async get profile promise of. Yeah. Oh, I guess we can just do this. Wait in first hit. Yeah. Anyways, so we have our profile, and then we're just going to say if profile family UID, we are going to create a profile family UID, or create a family passing the profile UID. And if this is the case, we want to await when this.family, oh, sorry. Why is it complaining? Oh, there it is, weird. Yeah, and this is also going to have a state loaded. And then we're going to say this state equals loaded. And then we start firing up the profile stuff. Yeah, this is interesting. How would you like model this stuff? And we could even say yeah, I wonder what happens here. So imagine we actually do. Yeah, because this returns a disposer. Wait, how does this work? Await when? And it returns a disposer? that doesn't make any sense. To cancel prematurely. The when function returns a disposer. Oh, cancel it manually. I guess that's what it's talking about here, because it's a promise. And then you, oh, god damn it. This is... Yeah. For some reason, I can't get my head around this. Like, how would you ensure that when all this stuff is nested, like you could do something else. Instead of having a state, you could have a promise. And then you can await that promise from, so you would have like, huh. How would you do this? You would kind of need an observable. Well, I guess what you would want. Yeah, this is interesting. So what if entities has a state, and then there's a public API for awaiting that state? This kind of makes it a state machine. Like, it's not really a state machine, but it's kind of a state machine. Like, a state machine only allows you to pass events. We're not going to do that. We are, so okay, let's imagine that this is not private. Let's imagine you have like yeah, okay, sorry. So let's imagine when okay, let's implement this in the disposer instead, because that's where it's supposed to be. So let's call it entity. And an entity has a set of disposables, and it also has a state. Let's see. Okay, so it also has a state and type, yeah, disposable. And it starts in loading. And then when this constructor runs, it's going to set up a reaction. Huh. Yeah, this is super tricky. Yeah, because like this, the reason I'm a lot inside my own head here now, but the reason this is tricky is because here we have this very explicit thing of awaiting something. But this is not good because you don't have an effective way to dispose of it. So if, for example, something happened when we were waiting for a state change, we want to invalidate continuing that. And then we don't have like a proper disposer. We suddenly have this cancel thingy. Well, MobX is an implementation of the framework, so we could, of course, deal with that. Yeah, maybe we could make this. Oh, sorry. We could make this a valid disposable. Yeah, this is interesting because what we could allow is that any of these, sorry, I'm like in API design mode here. What we could allow is for any of these classes to have like some instance when some instance foo equals bar, for example. And then you could say this disposable, or yeah, this disposable. So that would ensure that if something happened to this, it would stop listening to whatever it's it would stop waiting for whatever it's waiting for here. That would be the proper way to deal with it, because you shouldn't have these dangling async stuff running. So if this is being disposed for whatever reason, it should also dispose whatever it's waiting for, not only its events and stuff. Okay, so let's just make okay, let's see, let's remove this stuff. So a disposable can either be a function, or it can be whatever object that has a cancel on it. That's also allowed. And then we just check if cancel in disposable cancel, else we do this. And then we need to do the same here. Yeah, we can do this because it's a first-class citizen of the framework, so it makes sense. Like you can easily argue that it should be possible to do this. Now let's look at these states again. So the way this would work is that we would rather say here await. Oh yeah, but now we have another problem. No, we don't. Yeah, we do. Because we don't actually have, oh, this is, because we still want to await it, right? But if we do this disposable, then we get a normal function back, which is not something we can await. Well, we could, yeah, this is interesting. So if the disposable is of type, hello, Valentine. Sorry, I'm a lot inside my own head here. I don't think this is the best episode of the stream. But yeah. So what we could do is we could check here, what kind of disposable is it? So we could export type when. And when has a cancel like this. So, and the disposable is this. Okay, so this could be either a disposable or a when, right? And the same goes for this one. It could be a disposable or it can be a when. And if it is a when, then it will actually return, but that's very implicit. So if we give it a when, then it will return a promise that you can cancel. I don't like this. I don't like it. Maybe this should rather be part of... Yeah, maybe it should just be part of the API. So what you rather do is that when you have an entity, you can when it. So what I mean is Boolean. Did it have any other things? Effect, options. What are the options? Oh yeah, that's interesting. How does that work? Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm inside. I'm like debugging an extension here, so I'm not sure if I can do that. Tweet feedback. Yeah. Live? Yeah, I'm not sure. I have to check that. What are these options? Yeah, no idea what these options are. And the effect, we don't really need that. Well, we could have it. Yeah, let's just do it, just to see. Okay, so now this will rather become a first-class citizen. So it what it returns is the actual when from... Oh. And it will say this dot yeah. So the thing is disposable, then return disposable. Like, what do we actually want to return here? This is the problem. Because when you cancel, if you would manually cancel this thing, then we also want you to remove the automatic canceling. Oh. Jeg er på tap. Yeah, I have no idea how to deal with this. I think I have to think. So if you were able to say this await, or that would be kind of silly. Await this await. await this when this family state equals loaded, for example. That will be kind of the API, but you wouldn't be able to manually remove it. Like then we would have to override the cancel. We could do that. So disposable original cancel. So this would be original cancel. Oh, it shouldn't be this one. It should be when. Because that I reaction disposer. Why does it say that it has a cancel? Unless the when function returns a disposer, allowing you to cancel it manually, unless you don't. Like that in my head. What does that mean? Unless you don't? Okay, so if you don't pass in an effect, then you get a disposer. Okay. Is this the latest documentation? Is this like from MobX 6? I am confused. Okay, now it gets cancelled. Okay. So that means we can't do an effect there, which I think is perfectly okay. Okay, so we have original cancel. So what we want to do is to say disposable cancel equals let's see, this dot disposables push and then we want to do the same thing as this one. And then we want to run the original cancel. And then we return the disposable. Okay, so what we're basically doing here is that we're allowing it to, we are basically allowing this syntax. So we're saying when this, why is it, oh, did I change it? No, disposer, why is it yelling? Oh, let's keep calling it a disposer. So basically what we're saying here is that if we await something, then if we were to dispose of this profile for some reason, it will also stop this automatically for you. So it's safe to do this. You're also allowed to say, for example, this waiting and then await this waiting. And then you would be able to dispose of that as well by like calling cancel on it. Like saying, oh, this waiting. And then some other place you would say, but I wonder what happens then? Does it give an error if you cancel it? Does it say anything about that? Dot cancel. To call cancel to cancel. Is that an error or does it resolve? I guess it's an error. And then you would I don't understand how that works. I should probably test this. Yeah, but I have a feeling this is not the way to deal with this. Yeah. How are we going to... I guess we're way over time already. Yeah, we're over time. Yeah, I have to think about this. I'm not sure how to model this in a good way. How do you, like, if you have nested stuff that needs to load stuff and you want to wait for the whole thing, like, how do you deal with that? You just want to wait for it to finish, and then yeah, so kind of what would need to be done here is like all these await. If you were going to await something, you would always have to do it inside a try catch. But you never want to do anything on the catch, which is kind of weird. And the reason you have to do this is because it might cancel this waiting. And the only way to like properly cancel it is to throw an error, because you don't want to execute what it's doing here. And I don't like that. I don't like that one bit. Then I think it's better to have, instead of having these states and stuff, you would rather just say loading, for example, and that will be a promise. It would just be a promise, like an promise of void. And then you would say, okay, now we're going to create this family, and then we're going to await. Yeah, but again, you would have to try to... You need to do try catch there, because again, if the family is disposed, then we have to throw an error because you're awaiting something from that family. Yeah, I just don't like how this is expressed. But then we could say that, okay, so what we did originally was that we actually passed in the profile and the family here, which means that these entities aren't responsible for loading its data. You would rather do it on the outside, just like we did here. You would actually go and grab everything, and then you would go in and so here you would kind of new profile, profile and family. Like that's how you would do it. And then you're ready to render. But you do want them to update themselves. So maybe that's like a good way to, just like a rule of thumb is like, okay, whenever you create like an instance, you should give it the initial data, because you want to control the flow of initialization from the outside. But if you want that data to be kept up to date, that's something it can do on its own, right? Yeah, it has to be like that. Yeah, I think we're going way off here. So let's just get back to where we were. Yeah, we get way off track here. Yeah. You know, it's I shouldn't say this on the stream, but being at home with working from home with someone else in the house, it's horrible. I constantly get like pokes about, can you do this? Can you do that? I think we need to have a talk. Let's see, where were we? Okay, so we're actually passing in all the stuff we need. So that means that, yeah, so the reason we started diving into this is because if you suddenly get a family UID and you don't have a family, we want to create it, which means that in here we actually need to go and grab the family again, which is perfectly okay. So what we would do here is yeah, how would we actually properly deal with this? Yes, this is a general thing. Like, how do we deal with async stuff inside these entities? Because, yeah, so anyways, what we would have to do here is say, so this will be async. And we would have to say family equals this.api get family. And then profile family UID. We would have to await that. But this could fail. Like, we could dispose here. That's the thing. This might be disposed of. So how do we actually secure that? And you might say, what's the chance of doing that? And yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's a very small chance, but it's actually invalid to do this, because this profile might be completely gone. And then we would add the family and it would set up listeners and it would keep updating itself. Yeah, I find this quite fascinating. Like, co-locating logic like this, especially asynchronous logic, that's a huge challenge, because you never really know when the entity should still be available. You never really know. So in this case, we would kind of have to check if this is disposed. Like, we would have a flag for that. But that's like also horrible. So you would have to be able to do asynchronous code safely. Oh, but maybe this is a good thing, because this ties into... Yeah, this ties into Mobex's inability to do async changes. So if you have a method, you can change the state synchronously, but as soon as you do like in await, you can't change the state after that. Like if you have strict mode. So maybe... Okay, so maybe await this.async okay, so you could do this, and then you have a callback where you would actually get the family. Because what would happen here is that this callback wouldn't be run if it got disposed in the meantime. Yeah, it has to be like this to be safe. I wonder how, like thinking about this, like it's so easy with this pattern, like to create some entity that does something async and then it's removed, like it's not valid for the application anymore, but it's still running something async. And in that async thing, maybe it starts creating other entities that starts listening to stuff, and then things are never disposed. Yeah, I never thought about that. Again, I never coded like this much before, but it's yeah, it has to be like this because you want to do it safely, and this is the only way to do it safely. We do this thing if it's if it resolves, it will continue here, and you can still do like try catch around it. So if for some reason this fails, yeah, that's a problem as well. No, it would need an because the failing might happen asynchronously. So again, it might be disposed. So it would actually need an error handler. So do this thing async. If we are not disposed and it's a success, do this thing. If it's an error and we are not disposed, do this. That's how it needs to work. Okay, so let's rename this into entity. We're going to call you entity, rename entity. And let's remove this when. We are rather going to have an async API here. And this basically takes a promise. Promise, any promise, and then you have a success callback. Yeah, so this needs to be generic. So the success callback data, it gets that data. And okay, so what if we want to nest this stuff? So it can return anything. Then we have error callback, which receives an error. And that can also have like, well, I guess we can just do, oh, or can I do that? I think I can do that. Like it can be whatever. Now the point is, what we're going to do here is we're going to, I guess we can just use async. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to wait for that promise. And then if that's okay, we're going to call we're going to return calling the success callback with that data. And if there's an error, we are going to return, okay, so if there's an error callback, we are going to call that error callback with the error, and we're going to return it. And if not, we're just going to keep throwing, throw error. Yes, so when we do, yeah, let's call it entity. And maybe this should be the base thing. Like maybe class, like an empty class isn't what we should have here. Maybe we should have this thing. Okay, so let's, just for fun, let's implement get family. Get family, families, family, family I, family DTO. Okay, so now we should get a family there, which we do. Oh yeah, we can't have O there. We need to have any. We don't really care about the return type there. Or wait, we do. Yeah, sorry. Oh. So S and E. So the thing is, we don't know what's going to be returned here. So it's going to return a promise of either S or E. We don't know that. Yeah, that's the right way to model it. And then we can say this family, create family, and then we pass in the family. Right? So now we are properly, oh wait, we're not, let's see, private, let's do this, is disposed, because this is properly private, I think. Let's call it is disposed. Disposed. And then if this is disposed, we're going to throw a new error. Entity is disposed. And we can do like this constructor.name is disposed. Yeah, and we need to do the same here. If error yeah, if resolve had successful async resolve but is disposed, had resolved async, rejected async but is disposed. Yes, exactly. This is how it would have to work. And now we can, yeah, we don't need this one because we don't care about the error. And if we don't have an error, we're going to just throw, and we're going to throw, well, are we going to throw if you are disposed? I guess we're not going to throw because, yeah, that's interesting. We're not going to, we're just going to warn about this. Console.warn, and we're going to do the same here. Console.warn. So the thing is, it's not necessarily an error, right? It's just because we don't want to keep running the logic if we have disposed, which is exactly what we want to happen. It's not an error, but so this could be like in development, we would actually give this warning, but not in production. Yes, and then we await here, which means, so the problem is if we await this and then we continue doing something here, we're still pretty much fucked. Because it might be disposed. But you could argue that should just be part of the convention. Yeah, this is like doing async code. Like it amazes me how we actually don't deal with this properly. We always just await, and then we assume that our application is still in the correct state when we write the rest of our logic. And typically it is. But this is like such a typical source of bugs. We assume that, and we typically don't even create error handlers. We don't only assume that our application is in the same state when the async process is done, we also assume that the async process succeeds, right? That's typically what we do. So you have like two sources of bugs there. One being that we're not dealing with the error properly, and the other being that we assume that the application is in the correct state, and we just keep running logic. So the way you would like properly deal with this is actually to, whenever you do this async, you should really return. It could be like a convention. And as I said, the good thing about this is that this callback will now be, you can, even with strict mode in Mobex, you would be able to mutate this or change this state, which is important. And I'm a little bit unsure what that, there's like a function that does that. What's it called? Well, strict. Well, action. I guess I can look at actions. Value action. Blah blah blah. All have action. Modify state. Action always happens in response to an event. For example, a button is called blah blah blah. My actions, although can automate much of, they are run inside transactions until the outermost action has finished. Until the action has come by default, it's not to change the state outside of action. This has a blah blah blah. The action intend to modify the state. Wrapping actions using action. To leverage action should be passed as far outward as possible. It's good to mark a class method as an action. If you event handlers as action. Oh, okay. So you can just give it. Oh, that's interesting. So this returns an action. Yeah. So we can. Oh, that's interesting. So we can actually grab action from here, and then we can say action. Like this. That's pretty cool. Yeah. But again, I'm starting to think that this disposable stuff and this async should be like part of the core, like just a class. Because like this framework is here to help you write, like to separate code, to write safe async code, to manage complexity of dealing with states so that you have valid states, which is why we have state machine. And yeah, it's interesting. And even the state machine itself. So I think, yeah, so if the base is actually this entity, maybe we shouldn't call it entity. Maybe it should just be called class or something, or whatever. I'll come up with a name for it. And then the state machine actually gets all that functionality, but it gets this messaging API on top to properly deal with states. Yeah, like the state is not only just a single thing, it's actually, yeah, that's interesting. So you could say that an entity has a state, like an observable state, which is idle, for example. That's the default state. And then it basically just sets you up for dealing with state correctly. Instead of having like is loading, blah, 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 you would rather change the state to loading or saving or whatever. And then what a state machine does is that it makes that state not only like the label, but it actually holds state. So you have current, which is the label of the state, and then you have actual state related to that state. So it's kind of like a higher abstraction. But we always deal with state as a label. Like the app or the entity is in some kind of state. That I find very appealing. So that's like at the core, we have a state, we're able to dispose things automatically, and we deal with async changes safely. That's what an entity is. And then a state machine, it extends entity. Wow, now we're actually getting into inheritance now. Anyways, it extends entity, but now the state is rather an object. So you say current idle, and then you might have some other related state, and it can be many different things. And then it adds like the messaging on top to safely do the transitions. While in the base here, like in profile, you would just say, if we were to have state here, we would just say this state is loading, for example. Why is this complaining? Oh, entity. No. And type profile, doesn't it? Oh, sorry, it's because of this stuff. Yeah. And the question is, should we... Yeah, and then we can actually expose that on the class, just like we have. So we're going to have a state machine here. So let's add that off. So this target here represents like the state of the thing. And we can have this target on these other things as well. Do we want to force that? I guess we don't need to force that. Yeah. We do not need to force that. That's something you can decide how you want to model that. But yeah, this async thing is a good thing for sure. Because async await isn't safe. Actually. Like in Codesandbox, we have a ton of async await. And we don't do any checks if we are still in the correct state after we do that async thing. And that's a problem. So typically, like if you change from one sandbox to another, like all sorts of stuff can happen. Like typically it's not a huge problem, but bad things can happen, especially if that async thing starts changing overall state of the application and not only like the current sandbox you were in. Then it gets tricky. Anyways, I'm lingering here. I think we should just continue on this concept. So the thing is, like, we want to have a control flow at the beginning which initializes. So our entities, they are going to get their initial data. And then they are able to listen to changes on their own, because that will be weird to have as an initialization flow. They should deal with that on their own. And we are safely doing that using the async API. So that if for some reason we were to dispose of a family or a profile or whatever, it doesn't do bad stuff. And you can do complex things here. You can even do like this async again, and then you can do something else and you can continue, and it will still ensure that is it disposed or not, and so on. And I'm like, I would argue that this shouldn't be optional. Like, you should always deal with errors. So you would have to write it like this. Then I do not deal with errors. You had to admit it, that you explicitly don't care about it. Because you should deal with errors. That's the thing. Yeah, and then we have this.family, and then we can... Oh, I guess I didn't update. Entity. This.family dispose. And then we'll just delete this.family. Or we can say it's undefined, or I guess we can delete it. Anyways, yeah, so we didn't deal with any of this in Overmind. And the reason is that it's just super complex. Like, how do you make an entity take care of itself, keeping up to date? And if it's disposed from the outside, how does it deal with that? Super tricky problem. But yeah, let's stop the stream and we'll continue on this later. Cool, bye for now.